Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is scan. Let's take a look at some of the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb scan used is to mean to look at all parts of something carefully in order to detect some feature. So I want to give you an example of where this verb might be used. And the first thing I thought of was lifeguards. Right? So a lifeguard's job involves scanning a pool, or if it happens to be a beach, scanning the ocean to make sure that people or swimmers are okay, that they're not in danger or in trouble and near drowning, right? So they are going to look very carefully around in order to make sure that people are okay. Okay being the feature here. A second meaning for scan is going to seem really contradictory. It's going to seem like the opposite, but it means to look quickly, but not thoroughly through a written text in order to find or identify important information. Okay? So you might hear this verb used as part of instructions when you're in class. Perhaps if you have a lot of reading assignments, the teacher or professor might say, you can just scan this article or just scan this chapter. So they're not asking you to read closely, but perhaps they want you to just identify some of the main ideas or the big ideas of that particular passage. A third way you might hear the verb scan used is to mean to cause an electromagnetic beam to travel across an object or part of the body. Now, I know this definition might seem really complex, and you might be wondering what's an electromagnetic beam, but I'm going to ask you to think about the process of going to the airport, right? We get scanned, or our bags get scanned, right, to make sure nothing dangerous is in our possession. This particular definition also connects to the medical field. And we'll talk a little more about that connection as we look at nouns and related words to our verb. But the idea here is they're trying to get a picture of something that is not visible from the outside. Okay? A fourth way you might hear the verb scan used is to mean to convert a document into a digital form, either for storage or some type of processing on a computer. So this is a common activity in an office work environment. We scan documents in order to save them. Sometimes we scan them in order to be able to send them to other people. You should know that scan is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, I'm going to double the final consonant. So I'm adding an extra N. I'm doing that because this verb ends in a consonant, vowel, consonant. After I've doubled the consonant, I can add ing and form scanning. The past tense and participle forms of this verb, again, are made by doubling the N and then adding ed. The verb scan ends in a voiced N sound. So the ed is going to make a D sound. Scanned. Scanned. Okay. Now let's take a look at some phrasal verbs with scan. And I did want to identify a couple that you might hear and sort of connect them back to a few meanings or definitions that we've already talked about. The first phrasal verb you might hear is scan in. And this is connecting back to that fourth definition we looked at. So we're creating a digital copy or a digital entry of something in a computer. Okay? Let's look at an example of this usage. She scanned in all of her family's old photos to make sure they would be preserved. And this is something that's been a kind of a common activity, converting things that are in paper format, right? Like this physical format that could possibly be destroyed in a fire, or perhaps it doesn't age well, and trying to save it in a format that could last forever. A second phrasal verb you might hear is scan through. This is going to connect back to the second definition we talked about earlier. So if we scan through something, we are reading something very quickly. And our purpose in doing this is maybe we're just trying to get a general idea of the text meaning, or we might be looking for one or two very specific parts or specific pieces of information. Okay? Let's look at an example of this usage. I scanned through the sales ad, but I didn't see any good deals. Okay? So this might be something people do with Sunday newspapers, particularly as we get closer to the Christmas season here in the United States. You're going to see more advertisements. So this is someone going very quickly. They didn't spend 20 minutes looking at each item and all the details that in the advertisement. Okay? Now let's continue practicing using our verb scan. Today, we're going to make sentences in the imperative, the past progressive, and the simple future. Let's start with the imperative. You might also know this as a command, right? We're telling someone to do something. Okay? What is unique about the imperative is that we don't have a stated subject. The subject is implied, and it's either you singular or you plural. Okay? The other thing I'll note here is there's no question structure for an imperative. It's always just a sentence. Okay? So in the affirmative, we are going to start with the verb. The one exception to this is you could always add please at the beginning of the sentence in order just to make it sound a little nicer, more polite, but it's also not necessary if you're talking to your children or someone else and you just want to be a little more forceful and make sure they do what you're telling them to do. Okay? So for my affirmative example, I want to pretend that you listen for like your favorite teacher, right? And the teacher might say something to their students. Scan through your notes to see if you can find the answer, right? So perhaps the teacher, the class are reviewing a particular concept and people are having trouble remembering. So the teacher is giving this command, this direction. Do this. Scan your notes. Okay? Now, if I want to make a negative imperative sentence, I'm going to start with don't and then the base verb. Okay? Again, you could always add please at the beginning, but it's also not required. So again, let's continue imagining that we're listening to a teacher. The teacher might also say, don't scan the chapter. You should read it carefully. Okay? So both of these sentences are connecting to that meaning of reading something quickly, but not thoroughly. In the first or affirmative example, the teacher was saying, look quickly, right? Don't read every word you've written, but we're looking for specific information. In the second example, the teacher is saying, don't read this quickly. Pay attention to the details. Okay? Now let's look at the past progressive. We tend to use this verb tense to talk about an activity that was in progress when some other action interrupted it. Okay? To make the past progressive, we're going to use a past form of be, so that's was or were, depending on our subject, and then we'll use that ing form of the verb. Let's look at an affirmative example. A security officer was scanning their bags when they realized they forgot to take out their toiletries, right? So maybe this has happened as you have traveled in an airport, right? But we're supposed to, in the United States, remove a little clear plastic bag that has shampoo, soap, other sort of liquid things one might use in the bathroom, okay? So here, the activity of scanning was in progress, and the interrupting action was, oh my gosh, I didn't take the toiletries out, right? So that idea, you can see the word forgot. That's in the simple past tense. And that's typically how we'll see the past progressive used. You'll see part of the sentence in past progressive, and then we'll see that interrupting action in simple past. Okay? If I want to make a negative past progressive sentence, all I need to do is insert not after our be verb. So you might hear people say was not, or you might hear the contraction form wasn't. You might also hear were not, or the contraction weren't. Let's look at an example. They weren't scanning social media while they listened to the lecture. Okay? So this also might be in reference to some students who have really good behavior. They're paying attention. They're not on their phones looking at Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Okay? Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question in the past progressive, I'm going to start with that past form of be. Then I'll have my subject, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's an example sentence. Were they scanning the crowd for the lost child? Now, with this sentence, I think it's connecting to the first meaning, right? So that looking very carefully for some feature. So perhaps a small child has been lost at a place where there are a lot of people, right? So someone or many people will start looking carefully for that particular missing child. Now let's look at the simple future. And today we're going to make sentences using be, going, to, and the base verb to express our simple future. You might remember there are many ways to do this, but we'll just focus on this particular way today. And there are plenty of other videos out on the channel if you want to see some other examples of ways to make future sentences. So again, the form here is be, going, to, and the base verb. Be is going to be in the present form. So you'll hear am, is, or are. Here's an example sentence. Event staff are going to scan attendees' QR codes from their smartphones. So this may be an experience you've had. A QR code is like a barcode that you see, and this is a new way to look at tickets, to have passes to enter someplace by getting something essentially sent to your phone and then showing your phone and the barcode on it, and someone else will take a little machine and just verify that it is a legitimate ticket. If I want to make a negative sentence in the simple future, I'm going to insert not after my be verb. Let's look at an example here. Many users aren't going to scan the whole website. So perhaps there's a discussion going on about how much information to put on a website, where to put pieces of information, and someone might be concerned that people are not going to look through the whole thing to find some particular piece of info. Finally, if I want to make a simple future question using be going to, I'm going to start with a form of be, then I'll have my subject, and then going to and the base verb. Is the computer program going to scan all essays for plagiarism? And plagiarism is the idea of taking someone else's words, something they have written, using them exactly in your piece of writing and not giving that other person credit, not identifying them as the original writer of the words. Okay? And we now have computer programs that can move quickly through a document to try and identify places where that may have occurred. Finally, today, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb. And the first word we'll look at is just the noun form of the word. So same spelling, same pronunciation. And just like our verb, the noun scan can also have a few different meanings. The first possible meaning for the noun scan is the act of scanning someone or something. Here's an example sentence. I gave the newspaper a quick scan this morning. So again, not reading it closely, but maybe just looking at headlines, maybe reading the first paragraph of an article, but moving through the pages very quickly. Okay? A second meaning is going to connect back to the medical piece of this, right? So a scan could be a medical examination using a scanner. Here's another example sentence. He's going to have a CT scan this morning. Okay, so again, this is the process of having a medical procedure. It's giving something that's more detailed than an X-ray, but kind of using similar principles. Okay. Connected to that second meaning then is also the result of essentially the verb, the result of having that medical device scan you. You will end up with an image that is obtained by scanning or with a scanner. So let's look at an example sentence with this meaning. The doctor needs to review the scan before she can make a diagnosis. Okay, so here we're talking about the result of the medical procedure. The next word we're going to look at is another noun. It's scanner. It can have a couple different meanings. One is a machine that examines the body through the use of radiation, ultrasound, or magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. Might be more familiar with that. And it's used in order to make a diagnosis. Okay? Let's look at an example sentence with this particular meaning. You will be placed in the scanner and the technician will observe you through the window during the procedure. Okay? So here we're talking about the machine. Okay? A second way you might also hear this again is in reference to a machine or a device that scans documents and converts them into a digital format. Here's an example of that usage. To use the scanner, use your employee ID number, or we might say enter your employee ID number. Okay? And again, this is a common thing that occurs in many offices as a way for people to share information in a fast way and without making copies, mailing the copies, etc. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.